Do you like to complain about the minor flaws in your favorite games, and to complain most about those flaws when the game is basically a masterpiece? If you're anything like me, then the answer is yes, and I have a video for you. I have a complaint about the shrines in The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and to be a little bit more precise, it's a complaint about the way in which these shrines fall short of a standard that was set by Breath of the Wild. So in a way, this is going to be just as much a Breath of the Wild appreciation video as it's going to be a minor complaint about otherwise masterpiece Tears of the Kingdom video. And it's important that we try to make this kind of comparison because I think that Tears of the Kingdom really does threaten to overshadow Breath of the Wild in just about every way, because it uses all of its assets and just adds a bunch of new stuff and just polishes everything that was already there. But if you look closely, as I intend to do in this video, you'll notice that there's a kind of integrity to Breath of the Wild that Tears of the Kingdom just doesn't quite capture. And it has to do with the shrines. So let me start by giving you a little preview of what I want to show you in the rest of this video. I'm going to show you how the shrines in Breath of the Wild strike a really beautiful harmony between gameplay design and storytelling lore. There's an elegant narrative justification for the shrines in Breath of the Wild, even as at the same time there are good gameplay justifications. But this same thing doesn't really hold for Tears of the Kingdom. There are a ton of shrines in that game too, but there's an extremely flimsy story justification for their presence. Like, it's not very good. And so it's pretty clear that the main reason why there are shrines in Tears of the Kingdom is because this is a sequel to a game with shrines, so it has to have shrines too. The shrines are definitely fun, but Tears of the Kingdom loses that integrity that holds story and gameplay together so closely in Breath of the Wild. And if you're persuaded by this argument that I want to develop over the course of this video, you might also be persuaded of a second conclusion that I want to draw, which is this. I do think that Tears of the Kingdom is better than Breath of the Wild considered strictly as a game overall. But Breath of the Wild has a unique harmony between storytelling and gameplay that makes it kind of unbeatable as a work of art. And that's worth quite a lot in a game like The Legend of Zelda, which relies for so much of its appeal on inspiring the player's imagination with the moods and emotions of a whimsical and epic quest of fantastic scale. But more on that at the end of the video. Okay, so let's start by thinking about the shrines in Breath of the Wild before turning to the sequel. The shrines in Breath of the Wild have both a gameplay and a narrative function. On the gameplay side, they're kind of the main drivers and markers of your progression. Every time you find a shrine, it has a spirit orb inside locked away behind some kind of challenge. And the spirit orb that you get once you complete the challenge allows you to upgrade your health and stamina, which again is really the main form of progression in the game, aside from the powers you get from the divine beasts, which you need to unlock the Master Sword and to defeat Ganon. So that's kind of like the gameplay function of the shrines. They're there to drive and mark your progression through the game. But the shrines also make a lot of sense if you consider them independently from gameplay considerations and just look at them strictly from a story and lore perspective. The way that they fit into the story is this. About 120 shrines were scattered throughout all of Hyrule by an ancient Sheikah race who had this mix of technological and mystical powers that far exceeds any civilization that survives in the modern day. The ancient Sheikah people created these shrines as part of an effort to save future generations from the threat of calamity Ganon. Each shrine contains a spirit orb, which is some kind of mystical technology capable of endowing a chosen warrior with great power. And each of these spirit orbs is protected by a single Sheikah sage who dwells within the shrine and slumbers there for millennia in a kind of mystic, meditative trance that keeps them alive for thousands and thousands of years as they wait for the warrior who will be worthy of receiving this power. The sages are basically waiting inside of the shrines for someone to arrive who is strong enough to defeat Ganon, and when they find that person, they're going to give them the orb as assistance on their journey to help them out, make them stronger, give them what they need to do the job. But you might think to ask, how do these sages know that a visitor is worthy to receive the power of the orb that they have been guarding for all this time, whether that visitor is Link or anybody else? Well, each of these shrines contains a test that was designed by the sage who lives there. And these tests are the little puzzles or challenges that you have to solve or overcome every time you visit a shrine. The story or lore justification for these little shrine challenges is that you're proving to the sage that you have what it takes. You have the courage and the cunning that you need to defeat Ganon. And so you're the one who deserves the assistance of the Spirit Orb in your effort to defeat him at the end of the game. So the general way that the shrines are constructed as challenges that you have to overcome to receive a reward, it makes a lot of sense when you consider it from a story perspective, even as it makes sense when you consider it from a pure gameplay perspective, where they just measure your progress. That's because they're trials or tests that the Sheikah civilization designed to make sure that they choose the right person to entrust the power of the Spirit Orb and the power to defeat Ganon that the Spirit Orb brings. So maybe now you can see what I mean when I say that every aspect of the shrines in Breath of the Wild have both a gameplay and a narrative justification. They're part of this beautiful unity between storytelling and gameplay that pervades all of the design of Breath of the Wild. But enough about Breath of the Wild, let's now turn to Tears of the Kingdom. Here the shrines, of course, return, and they serve the same gameplay function that they did in Breath of the Wild. They're a driver of progression. You enter a shrine, you overcome a challenge or solve a puzzle, and in return, you don't receive a Spirit Orb. Instead, you get this thing called a Light of Blessing, which is basically the same thing. It's like a little token that you can exchange for health and stamina. And health and stamina are one of the main progression tracks in the game. So on the gameplay side of things, the shrines serve exactly the same function that they had in Breath of the Wild. And I would even go so far as to say that the puzzles are on the whole better designed. They take a little bit more brain power to solve, I find, and they're much more consistently good. So as gameplay, they're actually an improvement. However, I have to say, these shrines don't really make any sense from a story and lore perspective. But to explain this problem, I kind of got to set the scene just a little bit for how these shrines fit into the lore behind Tears of the Kingdom. These new shrines were created by an ancient race called the Zonai, who are basically like the replacement for the Sheikah peoples who created the shrines in Breath of the Wild. The Zonai kind of have all the same traits. They're a forgotten people with a mix of technological and mystical sophistication, unlike anything existing in the modern era, who use their powers to create these shrines and other technologies that can resist the influence of an ancient evil that has long plagued the world. The shrines in particular claim to serve as sites of purification. They kind of contain like a holy energy that expels the evil influence of the demonic gloom that gets into your soul at the beginning of the game and steals away your health and stamina, your vital power. This purificatory holy energy is apparently packed into the orbs of light that you get when you finish one of the challenges of the shrines. And the idea is the light kind of drives out the darkness of the gloom, and each orb of light restores a tiny piece of yourself that the gloom tried to take away from you at the beginning of the game like some kind of parasite. So that's the basic lore explanation of the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom. But there's something that just doesn't add up in all of this. What doesn't make sense from a story or narrative or lore perspective is, why do these shrines make you solve a puzzle or some kind of challenge in order to receive the purification of the gloom? Like, whoever made these shrines said, okay, suppose that somebody gets their soul stolen away by the evil gloom. Well, I really hope that they have the Ultra Hand power, because they're going to have to use it to solve a little puzzle if they want me to help them. It would be like if a Catholic priest decided that he was only going to give confession to people who are willing to fight a tiger in a cage and survive, or who could make it through a booby-trapped dungeon. You know, confession is supposed to purify the soul of the sinner, but it would be insane to make somebody do a little combat challenge before you give them confession. But that insanity is exactly what governs these shrines in Tears of the Kingdom. It literally makes no sense that the people who made the shrines said, okay, did an evil demon steal away your vital energy? Well, I hope you have the power of telekinesis, and I hope you know how to fight like warrior drones, because you're gonna have to do one or the other if you want me to help you out. You know, none of this absurdity was present in Breath of the Wild, because there was an entire storytelling reason why you had to face these challenges and these perils in order to get your Spirit Orb. In Breath of the Wild, the shrines were trying to test to see whether you really are a good warrior who has the power to defeat Ganon. So that's why they made you risk your life doing a few dangerous stunts in order to earn your orb. But nothing like that is going on with the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom. As far as I can tell, there is zero narrative justification for the reason why the shrines have puzzles and challenges that you have to solve in order to earn the purification of the gloom as a reward. At the end of the day, the reason they're there is because Tears of the Kingdom is the sequel to a game that has shrines, so Tears of the Kingdom has shrines too. But you know what? I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of narrative explanation that I'm missing, you know? Tears of the Kingdom is still a new game, and I'm not omniscient, so maybe there is a story, I just don't know what it is. But if you know, my dear audience, you should definitely drop a comment and fill me in. But until somebody can fill me in with a story that makes it all make sense, I want to tell you what I think about the comparative merits of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild based on these observations that I'm sharing with you right now. I truly believe that Tears of the Kingdom improves on Breath of the Wild in every aspect of its gameplay. It's a fuller and richer sandbox. The systems are more complicated, easier to get into, more fun than I honestly could have ever imagined. It really did top Breath of the Wild. But I think that Breath of the Wild nevertheless cannot be beaten when you think of it as a work of art that harmonizes story and gameplay into a single organic whole. It's a game where every mechanic feels like it's there because the narrative fiction needs it to be there. And there is a beauty to that kind of aesthetic integrity that shouldn't be forgotten when we think about these two games together in our heads. Because I do kind of worry that Tears of the Kingdom has this power to completely overshadow Breath of the Wild, but I hope to have shown you in this video that there's still something that Breath of the Wild has that Tears of the Kingdom lacks. And I also just kind of wonder, like, would it have been so hard to make the shrines make sense in Tears of the Kingdom? But anyways, my name's Chumpy. Consider liking or subscribing if you enjoyed what you saw. And thanks for watching, everybody.